let's have some fun here. Let's talk hypotheticals here. Something when we started 1-2, nobody would have said. What is Florida's playoff case? I mean, you brought this idea up to me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you start. I have some notes jotting down. So I'll come after you.
Well, I'll just say it's something that I've seen getting some traction online. I've seen people probably most of the time, kind of tongue in cheek, but be like, hey, how about the case for 5-loss playoff team Florida? And I mean,
oh yeah,
the argument that a lot of people cite is basically the Jordan Travis precedent, which is that, FSU last year was ruled out despite earning it,
deserving
indisputably earning it,
they were one of the most deserving teams.
Yeah. And the reason they didn't get it is because the committee decided that they weren't one of the 4 best teams without Jordan Travis. Well, is Florida a top 12 team with DJ Lagway? I mean, I'll give the game away here. I don't think so. But, I mean, it does kind of, it is a discussion that is going to be interesting just in general with this new playoff format. And kind of the at-large situation and what that opens the door for. Now, this conversation would be a lot more interesting if you had just beaten Tennessee, because if Florida's 8-4, then I think that actually is a conversation people would have to have given the schedule. But
yeah,
I mean, at 5, I don't think it's going to happen. But I think it's an interesting premise.
So I'll start with my case here. Florida, a top 10 win and a top 25 win against LSU. LSU did beat Vanderbilt, so I still think there's a big debate on whether if you beat a team and then they drop out the top 25, that's a top 25 team.
I'm a firm believer that is a top 25
for at least the next 3 weeks. Now, if that team goes and loses 5 games or 6 games, then okay, you're looking at the end of the season.
Also, it's preseason rankings that doesn't count.
Preseason rankings as well. But I mean, LSU, they did beat a Vanderbilt team that was once in the top 25. So I'll still consider LSU a top 25 team. Ole Miss, they beat Georgia. They were top 10 team. So I don't know how you look at that, but it's top 25 wins still. That's more top 25 wins than Penn State. They have 1. Indiana, they have 0. Tennessee has 1 against Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State has 2, with those 2 being against Penn State and Indiana, who I already mentioned having 0 or 1 top 25 win. So, I mean, when you look at best wins, Florida has the wins over teams that are going to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Then you also look, our worst loss, Texas A&M, they're going to be in the top 25 still. So, I mean, that's your worst loss. When you look at a team and their worst loss is a top 25 team and they have 2 other top 25 wins, you're probably thinking that's a 9-3 team or a 10-2 team. But then you look at Florida and it's their other 4 losses are also teams that are in the top 15. And then I also wrote down the new QB with DJ Lagway being a different team. And then I also wrote FSU last season. And then my last point is not something I necessarily believe in. I don't really believe in any of this. I mean, but if you want the 12 best teams in the playoffs, I mean, we're one of the 12 best teams in my opinion. I mean, we beat Ole Miss by 7 points. So usually when you look at a road factor, that's usually a difference in 3-4 points on betting odds. So that's still a 4-3-point win for Florida if you do it like that at Ole Miss. Beat LSU. I mean, when Lagway was in there, we were beating a top, what Georgia's going to be probably 6 in the rankings, 7
probably
in the new rankings. That, yeah. With Lagway on the field, they were beating that Georgia team, and they had the ball when he went out too. So that's really what my case would be. I probably wouldn't rank us because I like to put it more on more deserving. And more deserving for me isn't necessarily wins and losses. It could be I would put a 10-2 SEC team over 11-1 Indiana, depending on the SEC team. But
would you put a 9-3 S? Because that's probably going to be the real debate, is if you would put a 9-3 SEC team in over Indiana.
If it was Florida, I mean, bias-wise, yeah. So it's trying to keep out bias. A 9-3 Florida, those 3 losses being to Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. But then if we're 9-3, you add 2 wins against Miami and Texas A&M, who are both also Miami's in the playoff right now. A&M's in the top 25. I think you'd have a legit argument for Florida. I think we would be the highest 9-3 SEC team. Because who else? So Ole Miss we'd be above. Alabama's best win is Georgia. I mean, if you look at it like, oh, Alabama beat Georgia, Florida lost to them, then that would be there. But I mean, they haven't really necessarily been looking at tiebreakers like that. Yeah. So I think Florida would be above them. But am I missing a A&M? We would have beaten A&M. They would have been a 4-loss then if we beat them as well. So Florida, I mean, going into the FSU game would probably be somewhere around 13 or 14 at 8-3. And then
I mean, we'd be in a similar situation to what South Carolina's in right now.
But South Carolina, in the AP poll, in the AP poll, South Carolina is still behind Ole Miss and Alabama. We'll see what the playoff poll does on Tuesday. So I think we would be above South Carolina because we would have like 2 or 3 better wins than them still.
But I'm also assuming South Carolina beats Clemson next week. So I think South Carolina could jump those teams if they could beat Clemson. So.
I think they probably would.
Yeah.
You have anything else to say on your case, or is that it?
No, I mean, I think it's more just an interesting thought exercise. And I mean, I think everyone knows what Florida's schedule is this year and the way they've played. I mean, when you take out the Texas game, which, I mean, if you want to hold them accountable for that, fine. But I think it's pretty obvious that's the outlier here when you're evaluating how this team has played. So been pretty competitive with everyone given the schedule. So I think it would be a much more interesting case if you could have pulled off the Tennessee or the Georgia game. But
yeah. But hey, hopefully we have a legit case next year. And we're here to hear from today talking about Florida's playoff case for a bye.